Hi, I'm Elizabeth Grimm. I'm an evaluation consultant helping organizations build their evaluation capacity and tell their story through data. In this video today, I'm going to talk about how to create small multiples bar charts like the one that you see here on your screen. This is data from the Pew Research Center from their survey of U.S. adults back in October of 2019. And it's looking at how different age ranges feel groups are putting social pressure on them about the fact that they're single. So you can see here that each age group is listed on the y-axis, and then there's a different group of bars, a different small multiple for the group that might be putting pressure on them for dating. So there's a set of bars for society, family, and friends. And because each of these is in their own kind of mini bar chart, you can very quickly see that although the trend follows where those younger adults tend to feel a bit more pressure overall, regardless of who that we're talking about, society, family, or friends, you can also quickly see that society tends to be the group that people feel are putting the most pressure on them. So let's talk about how we can create a small multiples. Again, this is a type of graph that's really great when you want to show a lot of data across discrete categories. So these are categories that might not add up to 100%. And so you want to be able to show what's happening at a really quick glance. And things like a traditional stacked bar chart is probably not appropriate. I'll show you why. So if we were to put this information in a traditional stacked bar chart, you usually use those, well, not usually, you should always use those when the sum of the different categories adds up to 100%. You can see here that when we add up for each age category, the pressure from society, family, and friends, it doesn't add up to 100%. So in this case, a stacked bar chart is probably not the best choice of a visual for the data. This is why small multiples could be a great example for this type of data. Small multiples is just an Excel trick using the format of a stacked bar and kind of doing some data wizardry, for example, in the background. So how do we set this up? You would align your data just like you were creating a stacked bar chart, but you would create gap or fake data next to every category. Basically, we're going to trick the back end of Excel to think that there's data there, and later we're going to hide it and you won't see it in the graph. We want each grouping, in this case society, family, and friends, to add up to 100%. You do this by entering a formula. So you create the gap column, and then you would do equals 1 for 100% minus whatever is in the actual data category for that grouping. In this case, it's cell B72 for the society percentage for the age group of 65 and over. Then you'll press enter to populate your cell. So you'll see here that Excel has created that percentage, 100% minus whatever is in this cell here, 21%, and you get 79%. 21 plus 79 is 100. To apply that formula down, you just drag that green box and it will apply the formula down through the other cells. We'll do the same thing for each of the categories, because again, we want every one of our data categories to have some fake data that adds up to 100%. And we apply our formula down. So now you can see we have our three actual data columns, society, family, and friends, and then we have our three gap columns. Let's see what this looks like when we add a stacked bar chart. We highlight our data, we go to Insert, 100% stacked bar. That means that our categories should add up to 100%. Let's stretch this out a bit so you can really see. Now, I want society, family, and friends to go across. They want them to be my categories, not be my y-axis here. So I just need to click switch rows and columns. If your data doesn't come out the way you think it will, a good trick is to click switch rows and columns, and usually you can get it to appear the way that you're looking. All right, now I have ages on the y-axis, which is exactly what I wanted. I wanted it to look just like my data in the Excel. And you can see here that Excel has made every grouping, the real data, society, family, and friends, and the gap data into categories here. So before we start working, let's just clean this up a bit. We don't need our percentages because they don't mean anything here. We don't need our grid lines. And I want to format the data series by right-clicking, Format Data Series. Let's make our bars a little wider. This is through what's called gap width. So I right-clicked, I went to Format Data Series. My data series, sort of toolbar, I guess you would call it, pops up, and the default is around 150%. I'm going to swap that out for 50% and just make my bars a bit wider so they're easier to see. Okay, so we still have a lot going on in this chart. What we want to do is we want to make our gap, our fake data columns, invisible. We do that by clicking on the columns and again going to our formatting toolbar and doing no fill. I must have clicked off one. Let's try that again. Click them on, click no fill. And now our gap, our fake data, is gone. Let's do that for each of our gap columns. Okay, so now we just have blue bars for society, light green bars for family, and orange bars for friends. This is starting to look a lot like our small multiples example that I showed at the beginning. Now it's all about formatting. So let me show you what I used to do, which took a ton of time and could end up with things out of alignment, and now what I just figured out we can do. So what I would usually do is I would right-click my bars to add data labels because I want to directly add the percentage so no one has to guess what each category amount is. So I would right-click each bar, I would go to Add Data Labels, and they would pop up right in the middle of the bar. Then I would do some formatting, increase the font size, make the font white perhaps. Sometimes if my bars were too small and I couldn't put the fit the percentage inside the bar, what I would do is I would make the percentage font the same color as the bar. That's not the same color. The same color as the bar, and I would just drag it out to the end of the bar. And this doesn't take too much time, but once you know, if you have a lot of small multiples, it can start to take time. If you don't drag well, you know, you can start to get things out of alignment. We have these leader lines we don't want, so I have to click in and delete them. And it can just take a while. Well, what I figured out this week, thanks to a conference workshop attendee where I was giving a workshop, I figured out we can actually use another trick in Excel to add our data labels right on the outside of our bars. Let me show you what that looks like. To do that, we would actually click the fake data for that section. So this is our fake data for family. We would go to add data labels just like we were adding data labels before, but you can see here it adds the fake data. We don't want the fake data. We want to actually label these green bars with those data points. Now, the reason I'm not just going and adding data labels here and saying put them on the outside of the bar is because that's not an option when you're using a stacked bar chart. Let me show you what our options are. When you add labels in a stacked bar chart, your options are in the center of the bar, the inside end, which will put them right here at the end of our bar, the inside base, which puts them, left aligned in our bar, and again, center. So our only options here are inside end, which puts them at the right end of the bar, inside base, which puts them at the left end of the bars, and center. There's no option in a stacked bar to put them on the outside end like if you were doing a regular bar chart. That's why if you want to sort of trick Excel and have the percentages show up on the outside end of the bar without manually dragging them, we have to do a little back end work. It's not that hard though once we figure it out. So let me show you again what we're going to do. I'll delete these and start over. So let's say we want to put the labels for these green bars, the family category. We want the percentages to show up on the outside end, right here, right at the end of the green bars. Again, that's not a default option in Excel. So what we're going to do is use our fake data column, and we're going to trick Excel. So right click, go to add data labels, and again, what pops up, I'm going to increase the font, make it bold, make it our color. What pops up is our fake data, our gap data. That's not what we want on the outside of our bars. But we are going to make this show up as the actual data. So let's go back to Format Data Labels. Right click, go to Format Data Labels. You have these options under Label Options. You can do the value. The value is actually what is in the cell. I'll put those back. The leader lines, those are those lines that drag from a bar to the percentage. We don't want those, so we can click those off. So the value is our gap data, our fake data, but we want this data to appear. So all we're going to do is we're going to go value from cells. What the percentage we want to show up is a value from cell. We want the values in the family column to show up in these data labels. So highlight those cells and click OK. Now you see we have both the family data, the real data, and our fake gap data in our value labels. So obviously we don't want both of them, right? Now all we do is a little bit of extra formatting. We take the value off, we uncheck that, and we're left with our family data, right? 47% for 18 to 29 years old. Yep, that's our family data. That's our actual data. And then if we want it to just show up at the end of the bar, we click inside base. We want this data to show up on the left side, the inside base of the fake data category, which is also the outside end of the actual data category. So you can see here that with just a few clicks of a button, we've tricked Excel into putting the data labels in the outside end, even though that's not a real option. So let's do that again for our friends data. Right click, Format Data Series. Oops, add data labels, excuse me. Let's increase our font size, make them orange, bold. All right, now here it's all back to formatting, right? Right click, format data labels. We want to get value from cells in our friend cells. We highlight those, click OK, check off the fake data column, move them to the inside base, and there we go. We need to do the same thing with our society data because we didn't do that yet, right? So add data labels, make it bigger, blue, bold, format data labels, value from cells, highlight the society column, uncheck the fake data and put it at inside base. And there we've already labeled our data without having to drag every single percentage point to the end of the bar. So next, all we have to do is finish some formatting. We're going to add and directly label our category, so we don't need this legend anymore. We want to drag down. Sometimes it's a little hard to click in here when I'm trying to click, there we go. Trying to click our actual chart data so I can move it and drag it down because I want enough space to add a title and column headings. We're going to delete this chart title and we're going to insert a text box. Now, I already have one up here, so I'm going to just copy it because I already have the text that I want. All right, let's paste this in. Perfect. Maybe make it a little bit wider with help with formatting. Pull this down. And now we need to directly label our mini small multiples. So we insert a text box and we just type in our text. So this is society, blue. I'm going to make the text the same color as the bars, and I'm going to apply a text hierarchy. So the text for this is going to be a little bit bigger than what's in the chart. Just copy and paste that text box again so you're not redoing all of the formatting. This was family. I'm going to match the color again to the bars and paste one more time for our friends column. Make that font orange. And looks pretty good. The last thing I would do is get rid of our chart outline. So you see here we have a chart outline. We're not going to need that in our report or our PowerPoint presentation. So you can just right click your chart, click Format Chart Area, no fill, no line, and your finished product will look like this. So there you have it. That's how you can create a small multiples bar chart in just a few minutes, and how you can apply some, Excel tricks on the back end to get Excel to directly label your percentages on the outside end of your bars. So hope that was helpful. Let me know how this goes or if you have any questions. Thanks. Bye.